Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Milan podcast. We finally have a guest, but before I introduce him, we are alongside Matt Santangelo. Guys, don't forget to like, subscribe to the podcast, That Milan Podcast, and on Twitter at That Milan Pod, on Apple and Spotify. Please like, comment on the video. It really helps us a lot with the algorithm. So we have a very special guest today. Rui, I think were you on with us before, or we're just... I can't even think. We talked.
I think we made plans, and I kind of.
Yeah, that was years. Yeah, that was a couple.
I don't want to say I gave you the cold shoulder, but I had so much going on, and it was just it was too late for me to get on. So,
No.
but
Always you're always fair. And again, we're happy that we could have you in here because this is the second I saw this link to Conceição, I was like, Rui.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't think of another person possible. Just in general, not even for a podcast. I was like, I wonder what he thinks of it, and if we could get him on for a pod, we need to know the entire perspective from the Milan point of view, the Porto point of view. But yeah, Santangelo, how are you as well, brother? You got your men's league going on.
Yeah, I got a game in a couple hours. Just trying to juggle life, work, extracurriculars with after work soccer and stuff. So
yeah,
overwhelming, but it's I'm ready for summer, of course.
I think everybody's ready for summer. I think both of these teams, regardless of who Rui is rooting for, more so these days. Rui, before we get the Porto side of things, I want your kind of opinion of Milan this year. Obviously, we know they're heading in a different direction with the manager at this point. So that's obviously why you're here, because of the rumors of another manager taking over. Pioli's legacy, I think, will be remembered as a positive one in a couple of years, as opposed to right now. I think there's just so much bitterness within the fan base on how things have gone. But your thoughts on this season, because some people like to look at this second place as a sort of this cover for how the season went. But there was a lot of failures in cup competitions, and obviously the stuff that went down in the Derby and losing out on the league by 10 plus points. So what was your overall thoughts of Milan going into this year?
Going into this year, I thought we lost Sandro Tonali, and I thought that was going to be a huge. There were going to be huge shoes to fill in, but we made some good moves in the offseason. I think I don't want to say we're having a good season because, second place is good if you're not going to win the Scudetto, which I think we went into this season thinking that we weren't going to win the Scudetto, but finishing in second place, the Champions League is always the most important thing, right? But I feel like we could have just done much more with what we had, given the attack definitely got an upgrade because we weren't relying on Junior Messias and Salamakers all the time. Those were our two right wingers, and then not really having a true number 10. We still don't have a true number 10. And I think that's a huge thing that we need to cover in the off season. But second place is always good if you're not going to win the Scudetto, but I think we should have given more. I think defensively it's been an absolute disaster. The attack has been a bit has improved since last season, but the failures in as you mentioned in the Champions League and the Coppa Italia exit early and all that stuff, it's a huge disappointment. Yeah, we won't win the Scudetto this year, but at least make a stride in the Champions League or into the Europa League and try to get to a Coppa Italia. When was the last time we won the Coppa Italia? It's been forever.
20 years.
At least try to strive for something else, And I think that's just been a disappointment. I think we're also lucky too that Serie A hasn't been that great. Napoli really fell off. Juventus looked like they were, not really contending with Inter, but securing that second place seed, but they fell off. And it's just outside of Inter, it's just been kind of a mess. So it's good that we finished second, that we're going to finish in second, hopefully. But I don't know. I feel like if it was any other year, it's kind of like a success. But this year, it feels like it's a much more of a letdown because of the potential that we could have had to just go a little bit further in these tournaments and play a promising football. The defense is by far the most disappointing thing. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, the 6 goals conceded against Genoa and Sassuolo. take it away, please. I don't
Well, I mean, I had a clip from our podcast, Martino, locked and loaded and ready to tweet out. I think when it was level in the match, and I think we both were pretty bang on. I know you said Milan 2-1, and I said 1-1 because I just didn't know what type of energy reaction, like what type of team we were going to see in this match that, in the grand scheme of things, didn't really have all that much meaning. I mean, Juventus are kind of fluttering as well week to week. They're not really making any sort of strides to take second from us. And we're kind of just kicking the can down the road, trying to see the season out under Pioli. But of course, the way it played out, I'm like, this has kind of more or less been the theme of Milan's season, right? Like late surges, we made some, strides towards the second half of the match to go for a win, just like we did against Monza, right? Remember, we were down and we were like level with them, or a goal down, and then we gave up another one. And it's like, this team is just, they can't put together complete performances. And I think that's really been the theme of the season for Milan, right? Like they haven't been able to, at any point, rely on their defense and great goalkeeping. And those were, at many times towards the back end of the Scudetto winning season, the backbone of Milan. When you had Kalulu and Tomori and Teo, and some really good performances from Calabria, and of course Mike Maignan playing as the goalkeeper of the season, Milan haven't had that consistency at any point this season. And I think that historically what we've seen from those who win Serie A and who win league titles is teams that can defend oftentimes find themselves in the pole position to win it. I mean, we talk about the amount of goals that Inter have scored, but they also have the best defense in this league, despite losing Milan Skriniar, despite having a brand new goalkeeper. So I think that has to be a focus for Milan. I'm hoping with a new coach, maybe it's Conceição, which we're going to talk about, we can have that sort of identity where, look, we may not thrash teams, but we can play with a little bit more of a polished approach, play more balanced, and we can have those matches where, hey, you know what? The well runs dry up front with our attackers. We can win a couple games 1-0. We can play defensive, batten the hatches, and get results that way. So that's kind of where I'm hoping, the next Milan is headed towards a team that can provide a little bit more balance.
Yeah, and balance is kind of everything with this manager that we're linked to at this point, especially relative to Pioli, because there's so many things, and I want to get your take on this, Rui, because of just the amount of discipline that it seems that Porto play with Conceição. Like, you especially see it in the Champions League and sort of these performances. I know it was a bitter defeat in penalties to Arsenal, but just to get there with that sort of revolving door of players over the years. And obviously going up against a Premier League side that Arsenal's great, right? Like, we could meme them all the time, but they're still a really good squad. So to just even get that close, that's about character and resolve. That's something we haven't seen with Milan the past 2 seasons. And you talk about defense. How many times we not just mention it's about like the amount of space that Milan give teams and the amount of shots that they concede. The individual errors are embarrassing, and that's been a thing throughout the entire season. Whether you go back to the match against Roma in the first match against them in the season, Tomori picks up that red card on the second yellow. Like, these are silly fouls. Even on the weekend against Genoa, against Sassuolo, Yunus Musa's play against Lecce, where he's giving away 2 goals basically. There's just so much of that individual lack of focus and demeanor that this team doesn't have. And even at times last year, you kind of saw it in those matches against Napoli. Here, there has just been zero gritty, great defensive performances. I can't even think of one off the top of my head. That has to do with balance. That has to do with focus. That has to do with, I guess, just the reflection of who your manager is, right? Because a lot of the times, great teams will have the reflection of the personality. Simeone at Atletico, Porto with Conceição. I mean, Conte's teams, right? Like, we go that all the time, like, oh, wow, that really reflects on the manager. With Milan, we don't kind of have that. So we'll kind of get to the rumors at this, right? We kind of hear this pop up. Almost every single manager that was linked to Milan was signing an extension. But Rui, if you could kind of give us some insight and perspective of what's going on with Porto at this moment in time. We know AVB is taking over at the club, so it kind of looks like it's a brand new era. Can you kind of like guide us into what the heck is going on to some casuals?
Yeah, there was a bit of a civil war among Porto fans. I wouldn't say civil war because Vilas Boas won 80-20 in the election, and it was surprising. And who would have ever thought that Pinto da Costa was actually going to be voted out? But it got to a point where Porto was just becoming stale. The board wasn't doing the right decisions, and it held us back. Uh, since 2015, we've been under FFP and trying to dig ourselves out of it. And there's so much more that I could get into. It's just like, you need a whole other show just to go down to the nitty gritty of what really has gone wrong with our club. But had it not been for Sérgio Conceição over the last 7 years that he's been with us, I don't think Porto would have been. I think they would have been in worse shape in terms of finances, keeping Porto in the Champions League, going as far as they did, and even winning trophies, as many trophies as they did, winning the league 3 times in 7 years is really impressive, given like the lack of resources that Porto have had, and also just not making the right decisions in investing in players, like selling players for a lot less than they should have been. And I think that's held back Sergio from doing more things, investing in other players to improve the squad and be more competitive. What Sergio's done is just miracles. You can ask any Portista that 2 of the 3 that he's won, league titles that he's won, was due because of him and what he's been able to do. And that's a huge positive. It doesn't matter if you're in the Portuguese league, the Premier League, or whatever. If you can make the most with very little that you have, it's very, very impressive, even in the Portuguese league. So with Sergio, I think potentially if he is coming to Milan, I think there's a lot of positives that could help Milan. I think under Pioli's definitely, his legacy is always going to be positive because he steadied the ship. He got us into Champions League football. He's that bridge manager, like what Spalletti was for Conte, right? For Inter. Is Sergio the guy to take us to, another Scudetto, to take us further into the Champions League? That is a giant question mark, because Sergio has never had a position where he's going to have all this talent, a lot more resources, different egos, different personalities. But if I were to describe Sergio in terms of, a manager, he's kind of like a poor man version of prime Mourinho, Conte, even a Diego Simeone. He hates to lose. He comes up with a bunch of excuses, but he's super passionate and he holds accountability to all the players equally. He has absolutely no problem punishing top players if they're not performing, making it difficult. No one comes back into the starting lineup after injury, after suspension, just like this. Just because you're the superstar, you have to come back and earn it. You penalize the team because you were suspended, or you're off because you were injured. You have to work your way back up. And I think, and another thing that's been great with Sergio, with Porto, he reminded every single one of these players what it means to wear the blue and white. Porto is that blue collar team that works hard. You need to run, and you have to understand where you are and where you're playing. When you walk through the Dragão, you see all the legends, you see all the trophies, you see all the success in recent years and in the past. It is a culture there that cannot be forgotten. I feel like that culture at Milan has lost its way. I don't think a lot of these players understand, yes, in the past, Milan is this fantastic club, 7 Champions Leagues, all the legends and whatever. But I think they just don't understand it. A lot of them don't really, they walk through it, but they don't really know what it means. And I think having a man manager, a motivating manager like Sérgio Conceição is a huge, huge positive to kind of train, how do you say, to kind of blossom these players to understand where they're at. And I think you need that sort of spark, like an Ibrahimovic did when he arrived at Milan. I think that was a huge part in Milan being successful. You have that guy that has that way of motivating players, and I think Sergio is a coach version of that. Tactically, that's another a huge question mark on my end. Is he going to be able to adapt into Serie A with his tactics?
Sorry, yeah, no, where I was at, there was so much to unpack there, Rui. There was a lot of good things that I took from that, and the first thing that I wanted to touch on was, you said culture, right? I think that's very, very important. I think, we when we had Maldini, when we had Mazzara, and had Boban, and I know Boban drifted away. But when Maldini was there, and then Ibrahimovic came back, Milan feel like they had a culture. They're fostering a culture with Tonali, players that kind of were emblematic of the current Milan, where Milan wanted to go in the future. Matteo, like strong personalities, tough players that you can envision, up and down the pitch playing a captain's like role for you. And then when Maldini left and Tonali left, even Kessie, I think you started to kind of see, like, when you get new players, naturally that can kind of wane a bit. I think it's very difficult to maintain a winning culture and a consistent culture. And I think it's very important that Milan can head in the direction with their next coach. That hopefully with Ibrahimovic, and maybe that was part of the reason why he also came back, was to reestablish some culture and some sort of identity and a reference point that maybe Maldini played when he was when he was the director at the club. So I think that's something that I think that Milan really need to focus on. And then secondly, you touched on the resources, which I think is another key area here, because you mentioned the lack of resources that Sergio had at Porto. And look, I have buddies of mine who are Benfica fans and Sporting and all these clubs, and I'm like, I hear what they say when they're like, we can't spend, and we have to do this on the market, we have to abide by financial fair play, so we don't have the luxuries of some of these top clubs. But man, they're always achieving. Like, you always see Porto, Sporting, you always see these teams kind of in the thick of things and making good runs and showcasing their new fresh players. And I think that gives me some appeal with Sergio in a potential move to Milan, because unlike what Pioli had, Milan are in such a good position financially. They have a lot of rich talent in their squad currently. And I think there's a lot of players that are at a good level right now. But I think with Sergio and his way of doing things and his way of motivating players, as you mentioned, I think that's where you can start to get a little bit more and squeeze a little bit more out of some of these individuals. And that's how you get to that next level. I think in many ways, that's what kind of Ibrahimovic did for a lot of these players, is that, you had Leao, you had players that were very good in quality and in pockets throughout a season looked very strong. But then Ibrahimovic gave them like that bit of bite and personality. So I'm hoping that Sergio is able to, if he does come to the club, is able to kind of get his hands involved in that part of it and make these players, in a way, create a culture that I just mentioned, right? Like, you can do it on the field. It's not just in the guys you bring in. You can foster a culture that is winning, that is gritty, that is, to your point, blue collar. And you can have, again, what we talked about off the top, a little bit more balance and identity to this team, because I always see Milan fans talking about, well, what is our identity? How do Milan play? Do the players really take to Pioli? Are they listening to Pioli? Did he lose the locker room? People are asking these questions, and I think
Leao just went in the dressing room on the weekend. And there's no rumor of injury. And it's like funny too, because you see the way they lash out in that loss against Inter in the derby, right?
Yeah.
Like with the way Calabria is just smacking Fratesi, and just there's a difference between Teo getting the red card in that title winning season in kind of being a pest for Inter, and then there's like this emotional explosion that is just kind of childish, immature, that you can't handle the loss. It just seems like Inter's just mentally bullying them, and Milan players were just lashing out. I think there's a difference between that sort of toughness that a Tonali brings, where I forget who he was yelling at that one time. It might have been Dumfries on the ground, but that kind of infamous clip where he's getting in his face. That's because that's in the spirit of competition. When Calabria and Milan are down like 2-1, 2-0 at that point, and he's just swinging a back fist, and you're the captain, I think that kind of stuff and the lack of accountability that kind of Pioli has at times is a reflection of some of the decisions Redbird might have made over the summer, and just overall kind of what are we doing here? And it kind of feels like that point of, this is a much better side than when Gattuso took over. Because when Gattuso took over too at that point in time, I think he actually injected more energy back into the team.
Yeah,
and they were playing with a lot more personality at that point. Pioli is a much different than that. And the same kind of went for like the Montellas and the Giampaolos of the world. I think with what Milan needs, besides the tactics, is this sort of personality. And I think that's also why people really wanted Conte, because of, it's not just Conte wins, it's the way Conte wins. It's sure, he lashes out, maybe he's gone in 2 to 3 years, but the fact is he builds that sort of foundation where this Milan foundation in terms of talent is solid, but as a team culture in sustained winning, the reality is there's one major trophy the past 15 years or so. The Supercopa is what it is on a penalty shootout, and they were only there because Juve won both competitions.
Yeah.
So in reality, it's one trophy. Rui, I know we can kind of move to the tactics now, and maybe you're just a little questioning it because we know how Milan are. It's a high line. There's nobody in the middle. You can destroy us on counterattacks. That's basically what Inter's been doing the past 6 derbies or so. For you, the adaptation and some of these players, how were they going to be able to adjust if Sergio were to arrive? Because listen, as much as we all love Leao, there are times where he can look disinterested. He doesn't run as much. He doesn't press as much. And from everything that you kind of been saying and what we know, that might kind of be an issue to an extent. How do you think some of these players might be able to adapt to this system if he were to implement it? And how do you think he handles some of these personalities?
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? At Porto, if you sign for Porto, if you don't run, you don't play. But this is Porto. It's a different league. And the whole system is completely different. Porto functions on 2-year cycles. They, whether it's their youth academy, young players from South America, Africa, or even in Portugal, they blossom them, they sell them, and then they just keep recycling, right? Not so much the same thing at Milan, right? So that's the thing that gets me. How is this system going to be implemented? Leao is a superstar, and he's the best dribbler, arguably the best player in the league, top 2, top 3, right? How is he going to? This is where the egos, the characters in the locker room are going to be completely different at Milan than they were at Porto. Is he going to be as big of a disciplinarian as he was at Porto? Is he going to demand all these players to be running for 90 minutes like he does at Porto? That's just the biggest question mark, because at Porto you have to be. Sergio always deployed. I don't know if this is because it's a lack of resources, and there's certain players that they can go after, and Sergio prefers these hardworking players over these super talented or flashy attackers or midfielders. He wanted players to work that fit that system well in that league. And to break down smaller teams in Portugal is much different than you would if you're going to break down the mid-table clubs or the bottom the bottom 9 or the bottom 10 in Serie A. So it's, I don't know, it's going to be tactically it's going to be a giant question mark. I don't know how he's going to approach this. So having much more quality and more resources behind him, it could change how he goes about his tactics, being on the more positive side of football, but also maintaining a compact defense, a compact midfield, so nothing gets out of control. I think we're going to see a lot more improvements defensively if he does become the coach at Milan. It has to happen, and I think that's his forte. Just being super secure, super organized, and disciplined in the back end and in the midfield. And Milan have a lot of attackers that with a lot of quality that can create on their own. Where at Porto, it's not so much the same story. So it's hard to predict what we can be seeing tactically from him, because there's a lot of potential. I feel like at times Sergio wanted to approach a much more positive football, a much more possession style football, being more creative, creating more opportunities, but it's just difficult given that you are just so limited in resources. And also your oppositions in Portugal from the bottom 5 down, they play a complete terror style football where you guys have to watch the league in order to understand it.
Kind of like Udinese.
Yeah, because believe it or not, Porto plays better they play a much better football against Barcelona, against Arsenal, against Sporting, against Benfica, against a Shakhtar, a team that's been in the Champions League so many times. They play a much better football than they do against Vizela, against Estoril, teams you've never heard of. It's two different teams. It's like, how do we hang in with Arsenal? How do we hang in with Barcelona? How do we beat Benfica 5-0? But then we're just drawing and losing to these teams and the bottom 5 teams. You know, that's where the predictions are like, it's just a giant question mark.
Sounds a bit like Pioli.
Yeah, I know. I was just gonna say.
Yeah, but I think but you know what you're gonna get out of Pioli though.
Yeah.
He's been at the team for so long, and I think it's just gone stale. And on top of it, Pioli's not that guy that's going to be that man. Yeah, he can be a man motivator, but he's not going to rile up this entire team like in a derby, in the Champions League game. Where Sergio can do that. Like, Porto has had a terrible, terrible season this year, but making sure that you go into the U Clásico against Benfica, that you're going to leave everything out on the pitch. You're going to go in there eating with your bare hands, no forks and knives. And look what they did. Who would have thought, given the entire season, they beat Benfica 5-0 at the Dragão. From minute 1 to 90, it was pedal to the metal. And only certain coaches can do that. Is he the best coach? No. But he is one of very few coaches that can motivate a team in a derby. Look at what we're doing. Look what we've been seeing against Milan, against Inter in the last 12 years.
It goes back even
There's
further,
no
though.
hunger. Yeah, 10, 12, 13 years. There's no hunger. It's like we've lost... Inter don't even try. They look at this derby and it's a joke to them.
That's exactly like
joke.
that clip.
They have a harder time beating Sassuolo than us. That's
they lost to
embarrassing.
Sassuolo twice. They lost to them
exactly.
twice. This is the worst Sassuolo that you've seen. That's the thing though too, because
there's no way that would happen with Sergio as our coach.
That's exactly what
I promise to God that would never happen. You'll at least see some fight out there.
Yeah. Because I think the best derby that Milan have had recently was the 1-0 in Serie A last year. Prior to the where he sat Leao and he just puts Origi up top and he's just a 3-5-2 or whatever it was, and was just like, let's not concede 5. And again, I think that's the reflection of the manager, because it's like you're playing scared. And sure, if another team is more talented than you, that's one thing. But it's unacceptable to be playing the way that they play in these, because, you know, most of the times when you head into derbies over the years, and it doesn't matter the derby, right? It could be between teams from all over the world. You could say, hey, you never know what could happen. It's that sort of match. The fact that you can't even say that about this team right now, it's so disgraceful, and it's kind of a slap in the face to the fans. And I hope, and this is why I want him out of all the managers, that are kind of the most realistic. And I say realistic in the sense of not going to be the most expensive. He is making an upgrade in terms of like clubs and what he's going to be able to have in terms of resources. Personality wise too, it's just going to be interesting to see that fit. Because I don't know. I think this is someone that's he would inject so much life into the club. And I know things could be difficult tactically, and I know you have your questions about that. I'm sure a lot of people do. But I think more than anything, this sort of personality and what he could bring on that front, worst case, I think Milan will have a better sort of winning foundation if he were to come here. Like, if things like don't go well, you don't win a lot of trophies, I just don't think you would see crashes out like the way they did in Coppa Italia. I don't think you see that. And I think that's the most important thing, because if you're in a situation to sort of win, and this is a guy, and you guys beat it. I don't even know how you view it when Porto and Milan play each other, but when it was in the Champions League a couple years ago, Milan were severely outplayed, I thought, in both of those games. I think they did a little bit better at San Siro, but both of those matches, I think Porto were clearly the better side. Milan were the weaker team within the group itself. We know how amazing that victory was over Juve in the Champions League as well. Just so many great moments, really punching above your weight. So for me, that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. Matt, another question before we get to the final topic on this.
Yeah. So, Rui, so based on what you see from this team, right, as is, obviously we know there's going to be changes within the squad, players leaving, new players coming, hopefully new striker, central defender, maybe a number 6. Do you see the current construct of this team as something that Sergio can work with? Or do you think that if Sergio is the guy they really want for the job, there's going to be players within this team that, whoa, like this player who's playing a lot under Pioli, who has played a lot this year, he might have to do this, or he might not be a fit at all. Like, speak to that a little bit, because I think that people are going to look at the current build of this team and all the changes they made last year and think like, well, we want to spend more on less players. And I think that people want a manager that's not going to need a slew of new guys. They're going to want a manager that I think can come in there, establish his identity and play style early on. So can you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for players that I don't see playing next year under him, that's hard to say, but I think you're going to see a lot of
Number 2.
Calabria is one of them.
Number 2. That's my opinion.
No,
yeah.
I'm telling you, you're
don't
going to
think
see
so?
him play every single week. A guy like it's Sergio's one of those guys that he loves hard workers. You know, I don't know, that's a turn on for him. If you run and you're willing to show passion, you show some sort of fight, he will live by those players more than the most talented ones. He's done there's this guy Zaidu that plays for us. He's the worst footballer technically wise, but since he's fast and he works hard, he would play whenever he would have a chance. It's just
sounds like Salamakers.
but yeah, there you go. Yeah, a guy like Salamakers, he would have been starting every week with Sergio.
Trigger that, yeah. So.
Great point. But I think more versatile players. I think you might see Pierre Kalulu being mixed around quite a bit. Calabria is a type of guy that you're going to be seeing a lot, unless if you can get someone that's much more improved. But this Milan side is way different than the Porto players that you see. The Porto players are very versatile in terms of like being in the Portuguese league where the quality's not that great. A lot of these guys at Milan would be versatile in the Portuguese league, right?
Gotcha.
But here in Serie A, it's just different. The quality is so much better. The competition is so much higher. Is he going to have these sort of is he going to have this abundance of versatile players that he can move around and get away with it? It's not very likely. I think we're going to have to wait.
Like that.
I'm sure if he is coming, he knows that he knows at this moment that he will be going to Milan if it does end up playing out. So there's going to be a lot of time. There's going to be a lot of discussions. There's going to be some players at Porto that I'm sure he would want Milan to go after. But he's going to have some. He's going to have some. He's going to have some ideas of players that he would like to have on the team. I mean, there's just so many young players at Milan where Sergio at Porto has always made it difficult for young players to earn their spot. No young player outside of Alan Varela that I can remember has actually walked into the starting 11 so easily. You know, it's just he's always made it hard for them. He always wants them to earn it.
So yeah, with that, you guys develop players so well, and like that's pretty much like the whole thing about Portugal in general, the Portuguese league. I think they are the gold standard when it kind of comes to that. And Holland, I guess you could say as well. But Milan have a young squad. Their project is young, right? Despite, some additions with certain players. If he were to come, guys like, I'm going really young here, like the Kevin Zerolis of the world, the Francesco Camartas. And at times, I think people get frustrated with Pioli because he doesn't use certain guys. I'm one of them, because I think if certain players are just so subpar that they should lose their minutes and shouldn't be playing. And I know what you were kind of saying with Conceição. It's a little similar to how Pioli does things, and it sounds like it. But do you think he would do a better job in developing some of these guys than Pioli does? Pioli's kind of hit or miss, because we see him do a good job with this core and foundation of players. Like, he did a good job with Leao. Like, we can't not give him some credit for it. But then there's also the CDKs of the world. And, like, does he know how to adapt certain guys to their positions? Like, we know Pulisic is a bit versatile. And if he goes with this 4-4-2 potentially, like who were to play like up top with that? Do you see any of these players like struggling to get minutes, some of the younger ones, or like some that wouldn't fit into this formation that he has or play style. Like Tommaso Pobega, like what is his kind of future with Milan? Like I feel like that's kind of up in the air with some of these guys just because of strictly play style and how he would want things.
Yeah, to answer the first part of the question, you hit the nail on the head, and you guys know, and everyone that follows football knows that Portugal's kind of like the the youth academy of the big boys in Europe, right? So Sergio's been around a lot of young players that have developed really well. And they're doing really well right now in Europe. I mean, you look at Luis Diaz at Liverpool. When he's healthy, he's been really good. He's incredible. Look at Vitinha now at PSG. Even Fabio Vieira being a really good role player, very young at Arsenal. And a bunch of other players as well. So despite him being this like defensive and stubborn manager, he's developed a lot of young players. His son is an excellent product, and he made it always tough for him to get into the starting 11. And I think that helped him to become an even better player. He's been arguably our best player this season, and he's 19, 20 years old. So yeah, I mean, I think with these young players, he will give them a chance eventually, but it's going to take time, and he's not going to allow them to just get into the starting 11 just like that, unless if there's an injury or suspension. He wants them to earn it. He loves competition. That's what Porto has always been about, just giving your maximum every single week and proving that you deserve your spot. So I think that's in one way why he's such a great manager. And I think that's another reason why that even just average players at Porto just blossomed and overperformed, did so well, beating all expectations, because he just digs deep down into a player and just finds their potential somehow, whether they're 30 years old, 25 years old, 19 years old, 35 years old. Yeah, Taremi, even Ivan Marcano, Pep right now, he just finds a way to just get the best out of players. So I think that's going to be a huge help with this squad. And given who is going to arrive this summer, there's so much that could happen. There's so much that could happen that Sergio could do. But yeah, with young players, I think he's proven at Porto that he can really blossom them, but he's going to have to make them work to get their starting minutes, their deserved time.
Matt, any other questions? Because I have two quick ones for Rui.
You're good.
Okay, just want to let you get in there. Okay, so the two big questions to kind of finish the show off here is, one, will he actually become the manager? And the likelihood of him leaving Porto, because it's sounding like he is going to leave. And in my opinion, I think if he does leave, I think he goes to Milan. So do you think that happens? And if he does, which player from Porto would you like to see join Milan and potentially join him if you were to pick one player?
I do think it's going to happen. I think with the election of André Villas-Boas, I think Porto, there's already talks of Gianpiero Gasperini being the coach of Porto. I don't know about that. That would be so interesting, and that would be an André Villas-like manager, Villas-Boas-like manager to coach Porto, a more positive style of football, but also kind of similar to what Porto do with the high pressing and everything. But if there was one player, man, I would say Alan Varela. I think that guy is I think he can be exactly what Brozovic was for Inter, but even more. I think he's just an incredible, incredible player. And even just his first season, despite all the issues that have been going on with Porto in the board, in the locker room, and just not having a good season, he's been one of our better players. And he's been that glue in the midfield. Fantastic player. I would love to see him at Milan alongside Benacer.
Great. Well, and hopefully, maybe the positive news will be that Benacer is in much better shape. Because
he needs to be healthy.
I don't know where he is. He is missing. Santangelo, do you think this is going to happen?
I think so. I think, look, every day there's some sort of random name that pops up that we haven't heard. I mean, one day it's Fonseca. One day I think I saw something Graham Potter today.
Yeah, that's like the whole. Yeah, that's been like a
It's like
thing since like the fall. Yeah, I think
a
that's just
couple weeks
agent.
ago we heard like I saw like one really long tweet from Milan and it was named probably 7 to 8 managers, and I was like, so nobody knows what's happening, obviously. And now it seems as though that, look, and the way these things work, truthfully, is that Milan have been earmarked. They've earmarked someone for weeks by now. This isn't just a end of the season. Now we start our search. These things have to happen quickly. And if you guys recall last summer when Tonali Maldini left, those things were pretty fast. At least Maldini was. Like that was a very quick, like tears for everybody. Ibrahimovic leaving, and all of a sudden, okay, Maldini, out you go. Okay, Tonali, couple weeks, out you go. Like they made the changes quickly. I don't think it's going to be as drastic or severe with the market aspect of it, but I think it's very important that when you're going through a transition of one coach who has been here for 5 years and that the team that's established currently is really in his eyes and his vision, you need to make these decisions very quickly, and you need to get that coach in there as soon as possible to administer his ideas. So I think that this thing, truthfully, we're going to know within the next couple of weeks. I think it's going to be one of those things where it's not official, but you're going to start to see the legitimate sources saying like Conceição is in talks, like deal is going to be happening. It's inevitable at that point. So I do think it's going to happen. And I think, I think there's going to be that initial excitement, of course, with a new coach, new vision, new direction, and then hopefully, again, new identity and culture.
Yeah, I'm praying. There's a couple matches left for both teams. And again, I think it's a really good time for Sergio to leave. I think it would just be this sort of situation where you turn a new leaf. There's new executives and directors coming in at Porto for Milan. They're looking to push into a new direction as well. So I think it would work out for both sides. He's also familiar with Italy, having played in the country for quite some time. So a lot of those, like, it still applies in Italy. If you have the best defense, you are going to win the league or at least be in competition for the title. So I think that's a very important thing. Before we head out, Rui, we just want to thank you so much for finally hopping on with us. Again, all the information for Rui is here on the ticker. It's going to be in the description as well. Any final things before we send you off here? We really appreciate you just coming on, being a great friend, and the insight is just tremendous.
No, thank you guys. Always good to catch up with you guys, whether it's in person or virtually. But I'm so happy that you guys had me on. I love Milan, I love Porto, so this is awesome.
This is great. This is so good. Yeah.
But one last thing about Sergio. He's got a bone to pick with Inter. Just, he's
okay.
Things didn't go. Listen, things didn't go well for him when he played there. That's when the decline happened in his career, and he was a very good player with Lazio. He was a very good player with us too, and I think he's a little bit bitter too from the Champions League exit from last season. There was a lot of back and forth going on in the benches and with the crowds and everything. So Sergio is like Michael Jordan sort of when it comes to like, I took that personally. So
yeah, I guess.
And that never goes away. So let's see if this happens.
Good and bad thing.
I think you're gonna see a really nice derby next year, maybe 2 of them.
Yeah, I hope we're due. Again, you could follow Rui everywhere. Sant'Angelo, any final thoughts before you head out here and your stuff's on the bottom?
Rui, pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for all your insight and information. Hopefully this gets over the line and maybe we can talk a little bit more. Of course, if Varela or some other players get linked, which I'm sure that's going to happen. I don't know how legitimate the sources would be, but that naturally occurs when a good manager comes over. And now it's like, who does he want to bring with him? So I'm sure we'll be chatting very soon. And also to our community, thank you guys for liking, subscribing, watching the videos, supporting the podcast, whether it be on YouTube or Apple, Spotify. We really do appreciate it. We know it's been a difficult season, but based on the conversation we're having with Rui and, some excitement's coming from, his camp with potentially having Sergio join the club, brighter days should hopefully be ahead. So thank you guys for the support.
Yeah, we really appreciate all the support that you guys give us on audio and video. Again, we'd like to thank Rui for coming on and giving this fantastic insight. Try and turn the page from this season, guys. I know you don't want to watch the last couple of games. They're probably going to be terrible. But again, just try and it's over. everything's done. Just try and move on, try and look positive about it. I think we'll probably figure out something. And I will say, if it's not Conceição, I do think it'll actually be Fonseca. I think these are the only kind of two options that kind of make sense and are feasible at this point in time for Milan. I just want to kind of get that across as well. So we're not saying this is going to happen, but with everything we kind of just talked about, this is feeling strong with these links. And again, it doesn't look like he's demanding too high of a salary from the latest report. So again, I was a little surprised by that because George Menz is involved in this. So I was a little surprised and taken back by it, but you never know what could happen there. Again, guys, follow the fellas here. Like, comment, subscribe. And other than that, thank you so much for watching and listening. Take care.